Status report, Commander.
All sectors are secure.
The fleet is ready.
They had a human officer candidate, Lieutenant Maren Cole, Deep Space Command Division. The Admiralty would evaluate her. Good. Let them. The Interstellar Command Headquarters on Orbital Platform Meridian had been processing officer promotions for 214 years. Its evaluation board held a 58% advancement rate, the most rigorous selection process in the Coalition's central command structure, and its promoted officers commanded positions across 19 active battle groups, 6 frontier defense corridors, and 3 rapid response fleets. The board did not advance officers on the basis of species. It advanced them on the basis of record. This was officially the policy. What the policy did not fully account for was the weight of institutional memory, the accumulated assumption of which species produced strategic thinkers, which species had been in the Coalition long enough to be considered for senior command, and which species had only recently been given a seat at the table. Humans had held Coalition membership for 28 years. Human officers had been eligible for Deep Space Command consideration for 11. In 11 years, for humans had advanced past the evaluation board. There was currently one under review. Her name was Lieutenant Maren Cole. She was 29 years old, born on a deep frontier station at the outer boundary of mapped Coalition space, and she had arrived at the evaluation board with a service record that the reviewing admiral had read 3 times. Not because it was confusing, because the first 2 readings produced conclusions that seemed inconsistent with her listed age and rank. She had served 7 years on active duty before the nomination. 4 of those years were in frontier defense postings that most Coalition officers specifically requested transfers away from. Her operational file contained 23 documented engagements, 6 of which had been flagged by the nomination committee for independent verification before the file was accepted, because the outcomes listed did not align with the resource levels recorded as available. The verification had come back confirmed. Every engagement, every outcome. Maren had not mentioned any of this during her preliminary interview. She had arrived, completed her psychological evaluation, reviewed the briefing materials, and conducted herself with the specific quality of someone who was focused on the process and not particularly interested in how she was being perceived during it. The evaluation board, however, was very interested in her. The formal review session convened at 0900 in the primary assessment chamber. 7 admirals around a curved table. 1 candidate standing at the floor's center position. The kind of room where careers were decided not just by what you knew but by how you handled pressure from people who outranked you by several decades of institutional authority. Admiral Vash Ren, senior board member, Keth species, 41 years of command experience, introduced the combat record question the way that certain senior officers introduce questions, with the patience of someone who has already decided what the answer will be. Lieutenant Cole. His tone was measured, professionally courteous, the kind of courtesy that has a frame around it. Before we discuss strategic assessment, I'd like to establish a practical baseline. Your file lists 23 engagements over 7 years. For context, a pause, short, deliberate. What would you estimate as a reasonable kill count for a human officer at your stage of service? 2 of the 7 admirals adjusted their posture. The small, controlled adjustment of people who recognized the nature of the question and had already decided it was reasonable. Maren looked at Admiral Ren with gray eyes that did not shift with the room. They shifted only when she was thinking. That depends on how you're categorizing the count, she said. Her voice was level. Genuinely level, not performed. Do you want direct engagement numbers? Or are you including the secondary outcomes from the 3 siege operations? Admiral Ren said, with the patience of someone preparing for a predictable answer. Let's start with direct engagement. Maren gave him a number. The room did not react all at once. It processed the way a system processes, sequentially, each node running its own calculation, checking its own reference points, arriving at its own conclusion about whether what it had just received was consistent with the parameters it understood to be possible. Admiral Ren said, with considerably different energy than he had started with, that figure isn't standard for your rank classification. No, Maren said. It isn't. The documentation is in the file you've already reviewed. She said it without edge, as a statement of fact. The third section, engagements 14 through 19, are the ones that were flagged. The verification documentation is attached to each. Footage exists for all 6. The Admiral at the far left of the table, Admiral Sova, a Drell, the youngest board member at 31 years of service, had already opened the file on the display in front of her. She was reading, not performing reading, actually reading with the specific focused expression of someone whose prior model of the situation was being revised in real time. Admiral Ren looked at her, then at the file in front of him. He opened the footage archive. What followed was not a standard evaluation session. What followed was 47 minutes that Admiral Ren had not planned for and would later describe in his board notes as the most significant reorientation of a strategic assessment he had conducted in 19 years on the evaluation panel. The engagements were not impressive in the way that training simulations were impressive. There was no clean narrative, no optimal resource allocation, no textbook application of standard doctrine. What the footage showed was 7 years of problems that didn't have solutions, only outcomes that someone had forced into existence through methods that the board's standard evaluation rubric did not have a category for. Communication blackout operations. Zero resupply engagements. Situations where the coalition's standard protocol answer was request extraction, and extraction was not available. The footage showed what happened when a human officer decided that not available was a temporary condition. By the 4th engagement, Admiral Sova had stopped taking notes. By the 6th, Admiral Ren had leaned forward in his chair and had not leaned back. By the time the archive closed, the assessment chamber was holding a silence that was not procedural. It was the silence of 7 experienced military minds recalibrating something they had held as a settled assumption. Admiral Ren closed the display. He looked at Lieutenant Cole, who had stood in the center of the room for 47 minutes with the same steady expression she had entered with. "Your strategic assessment portion of this evaluation," he said carefully, "will need to be restructured." Maren waited. "The standard questions," he continued, "assume a particular experiential baseline." He paused. "You appear to have significantly exceeded it." Something moved in Maren's expression then. Not pride, not satisfaction, something quieter than both. The expression of someone who had done the work and was simply present for the moment when other people caught up to it. "I'd still like to take the assessment," she said. "The standard version." Admiral Sova looked up from her display. "Why?" Maren considered the question with those gray eyes. "Because knowing where the baseline is," she said, "is useful information." She said it simply. The way someone states a principle they've operated on for long enough that it no longer requires explanation. Admiral Ren looked at her for a long moment. Then he opened the board's advancement record and began writing his preliminary assessment. Under Lieutenant Cole's evaluation summary, he wrote 4 words: redefine the baseline criteria.